remember, people, corrupt your own children because they're going to get corrupted. You might as well get them corrupted with good taste.
Welcome back to GC8, Geek Channel 8. I'm Eric, and with me today is...
Will.
And gotta say, you may have noticed that the podcast is coming out a little less often than it used to. We're all busy right now, and I see that continuing for the near future. So we used to say that we released every date with an 8. Now I'm saying we're pretty much releasing on dates with an 8, not necessarily every one of them.
Right.
I apologize for that. We hope to get back to a tri-monthly schedule sometime in 2025. But until then, we'll try to get you at least one episode a month every month. We got a couple of movies today that we're going to talk about that have a lot to do with music. And so I wanted to mention what I've been watching on YouTube, which is a music-based channel that is incredibly popular. So chances are most people here watching us or listening to us have heard of it. By way of introduction, like a lot of people, I started watching reaction videos during the pandemic because they got incredibly popular. And this is often really super cheesy. Like, it's like metal fan listens to hip hop for the first time. And I'm like, come on, like you're making a video on the internet and you've never heard hip hop before. What culture do you live in? It's like everywhere. So they had to get increasingly weirder ones where it's like Irish people try American bourbon for the first time,
See, I like
or
those better. Yeah, definitely. Food.
tribal people in Afghanistan watch Bob Ross painting, It got crazier. But one channel that really took off and is really worth watching is Elizabeth Zaroff's charismatic voice. So she's a classically trained opera singer. And sometimes you're like, oh, come on. You've never heard the Rolling Stones before, So there's still some of that, but she claims to have been like raised in a very sheltered environment and also like classically trained, doesn't know much about modern music. So she's a big metal fan. She does a lot of metal videos, but her fans will recommend stuff to her. And I think the latest one was this is Spinal Tap's Big Bottom. So that was interesting after she had experienced like metal in general and then like moving on to parody metal. But she's a voice coach, so she goes over like where this is coming from, and and she's like using money from the channel to like to kickstarter a like vocal research, like putting cameras down people's throat while they sing, which apparently nobody had ever thought to do before.
What? How would that even work? I mean, it thinks like I would interfere with the actual process, but maybe
I don't know.
we do live in the future. Fairness.
Anyway, her channel's called The Charismatic Voice, and it's pretty cool. It's worth checking out. She's currently pregnant with her second child, so it's probably going to go on hiatus soon, so catch it while you can.
Okay, reaction videos and watching reaction videos are one of those things that, I'm like, I had old guy reaction. Why don't you just enjoy it for yourself? Why you gotta watch other people enjoying it? Okay, so after I got through my old guy reaction,
Wait, you realize you're on a show where we talk about movies. Did you not know what this show was about?
We are curators, man. It's different when we do it. No, okay, but for real, I did. Because I have kids, right? And like one of my favorite movie moments was seeing the Avengers, half of everybody die. Movie ends. My son is like, what just happened? And he's freaking out because I couldn't have that moment because I've been a comic books fan for decades.
I was in the theater and people are shocked and gasping, and I'm like, it's the comics, right? They're gonna bring everybody back.
It didn't. And the thing is, I had that moment when I was a kid when I didn't know that they were going to bring everybody back. he had that moment then. I let it roll in and I did. I soaked in that secondhand. I'm like, oh, it's like having that moment all over again. So yeah, I do understand the reaction videos. So yeah.
First film we're going to talk about is Disney's Fantasia from 1940.
Well, that's what started. I was doing this Sorcerer's Apprentice with Mickey Mouse, and I happened to have dinner one night with Stokowski. Stokowski said, "Oh, I would love to conduct that for you," you know? Well, that led to not only doing this one little short subject, but it got us involved where I did all of Fantasia, and before I knew it, I ended up spending $400 and some odd thousand getting music with Stokowski. Well, we were just going a little bit beyond what they were getting in the art school, where they work with the static figure. We were dealing in motion, movement, the flow of movement, the flow of things, you know, action, reaction, all of that. That's about did it, you know.
What you're going to see are the designs and pictures and stories, music inspired in the minds and imaginations of a group of artists. At first, you're more or less conscious of the orchestra. Then the music begins to suggest other things to your imagination.
Mr. Stokowski. My congratulations, sir.
Congratulations to you, Mickey.
Gee, thanks. Well, so long. I'll be seeing you.
Goodbye.
Okay, so 1940, of course, World War II is in full swing. In order to not have everything be about World War II, I'll sprinkle in some other stuff, but I can't, it's unavoidable. It's, of course, the biggest thing happening in the entire world and is truly like World War One is kind of a world war, but World War II was a world war. I mean, you had
Yeah.
U-boats in the Antarctic Sea, and you had like stuff going on in the other at the North Pole, and you had, every single continent
Every
involved.
continent.
January 19th, the first Hollywood anti-Nazi comedy came out. It was the Three Stooges, You Nazi Spy.
Good on them.
Props to the Three Stooges because, there was a lot of isolationism still in the US at that time. And
Yeah.
in February, there was the last charge by a British cavalry regiment when the Royal Scots Greys were called to quell Arab rioters in Mandatory Palestine.
Wow.
March 30th, the song When You Wish Upon a Star by Ray Eberly and Glenn Miller topped the American pop charts. April 7th, Booker T. Washington becomes the first African American on a U.S. postage stamp. May 10th, the Battle of France begins. By June 18th, you have Winston Churchill telling the House of Commons in the UK, quote, The Battle of France is over. The Battle of Britain is about to begin. On the 27th of July, the first cartoon with Bugs Bunny, the Oscar-nominated cartoon short A Wild Hare, comes out. Now, he wasn't called Bugs Bunny yet. And his nemesis, Elmer Fudd, who might not have been called Elmer Fudd yet either, was already appearing in cartoons dating to the year before.
Ah.
He would officially be called Bugs Bunny starting in 1941.
So the Joker was born before this Batman? No, wait. Well, who was the Joker and who's the Batman of this? All right, never mind.
Joker would have premiered the previous year also in Batman comics.
No way. I
Yes.
was just making a strained analogy, but this is way better.
Also, Catwoman, then known as the Cat, would have made her first appearance. On August 25th of 1940, there was the bombing of Berlin, carried out by the British Royal Air Force. In September 27th, Germany, Italy, and Japan signed the Tripartite Pact, codifying the Axis powers. October 1st, the first section of the Pennsylvania Turnpike, the first long-distance control access highway, is opened in the U.S.
Ah, I always thought that as a post-war thing. Interesting.
And then November 13th of 1940, the Walt Disney animated film Fantasia becomes the first film shown in stereophonic sound. We'll talk more about that in a second. It had its world premiere at the Broadway Theater in New York City. It's the first box office failure for Disney, but it recoups its costs years later and becomes one of the most highly regarded of Disney's films. Okay, so how did this come about? I already mentioned Bugs Bunny and Elmer Fudd. They started appearing in Merry Melodies cartoons for Warner Brothers, which was kind of a takeoff or a ripoff, if you want, on Silly Symphonies, which were Disney cartoons. And Disney's main mascot to this day is Mickey Mouse. But Mickey Mouse was already starting to lose popularity. So Goofy and Donald Duck were already more popular Disney characters. And then, of course, we talked about other characters like Bugs Bunny were starting to become more popular. So they wanted to bring back Mickey in a big way. And the plan was to have a feature-length film based on Getty's Sorcerer's Apprentice. Eventually, the costs of making that got so much that they're like, this is never going to be profitable. So let's take it and make it a short as part of a larger collection of films. It was set to classical music. It was played in what they called Fantasound, which was developed by Disney and RCA. And it was the first multi-channel audio production. So really the first movie shown in stereo. And in fact, they jumped even ahead of stereo to, the fact that there were multiple speakers. It was like the first, precursor to surround sound.
Nice.
It's worth noting that when you adjust for inflation, Fantasia is the 23rd highest grossing film of all time in the US.
Wow.
This is in the top 25.
Huh.
Keep in mind, this was considered a box office failure at the time. Now, there was a lot going on in the country at the time.
Yeah, that's true.
It was selected for preservation in the National Film Registry of the U.S. Library of Congress as being culturally, historically, or aesthetically significant.
Was this some expression of was this like an artistic expression? I mean, I know there was about you mentioned it was about reviving, one of their mascots, but it had the feeling of like, I am an artiste, and I am doing something. We are doing something incredible here, and the way that, and pay attention. And here is my grand vision, which I mean, the man had vision, but this felt a little pretentious, maybe.
Yeah, In some ways it is, but it's actually not. It's not that calculated. Like it's more came together as like, okay, here's this project that's going over budget. They gave it to a guy named Stokowski, and they're like, here, save this. And he had some ideas of his own, and that's kind of how it evolved. Stokowski, Leopold Stokowski, well known to classical music fans, was the conductor of the Philadelphia Orchestra.
Mm.
He was the founder of the Hollywood Bowl Symphony Orchestra and the American Symphony Orchestra. So he's pretty much one of the biggest names in conducting in US history. All right. So yeah, so they basically told him to like come up with something, and this is what he came up with, you know. What is kind of pretentious, I think, by modern standards, wasn't at the time, which is at the opening, the narrator comes out. I think his name was Deems Taylor.
Yeah.
So he enters the stage in this very low lighting and stuff like that, and he's pretty heavy-handed by today's standards. But I think part of it was educating the audience to what they were going to see, because they were clearly going for an audience that was not classical music fans, you know. Nobody had ever done something like this where it's like complete music video.
Well, I mean, it's weird because I don't have a sense. So much of the animation that I absorbed years after it was made, and but I'm like, I know other studios at some point did things with music. I don't know. I mean, when that comes to mind, a minimum animated instruments walking around playing themselves, that kind of stuff. But I think that started as early as the 30s. Certainly still in black and white, stuff like that. So I was kind of like, are you really trying to tell me this has never been done before? Because that seems like it might have been done before. And and then I'm sitting me down a rabbit hole, like, I don't know, got off into opera and stuff. But regardless, the thing is, I'm like, okay, regardless, the abstract nature of it, what they were presenting, I think maybe that makes sense. But maybe like the audiences at the time, most of what I know and recognize about classical music is from cartoons, though usually Warner Brother cartoons or somebody else's. And I thought their choices were odd here.
Okay, so let's get into their choices. So it opens with Deems Taylor like introducing this, and he tells us that there's basically three kinds. One is stuff where the music is literally interpreted on the screen by the animation. One's where the music suggested things, and that's what was animated, and ones that are completely abstract. And it starts with that third kind. Basically, it's Toccata Fugue in D minor by Johann Sebastian Bach, which great choice of music right from the get-go. And then it starts with like the orchestra who you see in silhouette on stage, and they're surrounded by abstract patterns and shapes and stuff like that until it eventually moves from that into just completely abstract on the screen. So animated lines, animated shapes, stuff like that.
Mm-hmm. I like that music. I think I would have found the music by itself more. Don't make that pun. Okay, yeah, animating.
Uh,
Than I did the animation. It was. I That's when Becca was excited. She's a big Disney lover. But she was excited to watch that, and then she's like, I'm gonna take a nap now. This is very relaxing. She found it very relaxing, and I of course stayed this course, and I took notes and stuff. But there wasn't, you know, it was it for me. If anything, like I said, I think that the animation plus the music left less of an impact than listening to music by itself. Music could stand on its own, and I didn't really feel like this added very much.
I disagree, but part of that, there, generally, I believe that's the case for music video in general with all music videos. Like, which is a strange thing to say coming from someone who's considers themselves a filmmaker. But I've always thought that music videos really kind of ruin the music a lot of the times. However,
Except Take on Me. That no one would remember that song if it wasn't for that video.
Here's a choice of food and drink to satisfy anyone and everyone. You'll find something to please you to add to your evening's enjoyment. Something to please all tastes and age groups.
Okay. That's all right. So, actually, I don't think that matched. I had a nice, fried potatoes and some steak on the side. It was great. And I thought it would be appropriate. Okay. It's time period, like meat, potatoes, 1940s, perfect. What I would recommend as a pairing for this movie, I want you to get 2 eggs and I want you to poach them. I don't want you to poach them in anything rich, just in water. And the most you should put on them is salt and pepper. Maybe skip the pepper and the salt even. I want you to take one 1-inch slice of Spam. And I want you to fry it on both sides.
Spam.
Spam, yes. Okay. I want you, and you can do whatever you want to that. Prepare it to your liking. I suggest a nice hot sauce, actually. If you want to emulate the film, you will probably need, for my opinion, you would need like a whole plate full of poached eggs and just a little bit, like 2 pieces of Spam. That's what my recommendation for the pairing. Now, in all seriousness, folks, it was Spam and eggs was a very popular dish at the time. People scoff at Spam, but look, it's fatty meat. If you cut that thin and you sear it on both sides, you get crispy, you get greasy, you get good taste and flavor, and you can add spice to that and on top of that. And honestly, a poached egg is nothing to sneeze at. Get it nice in the middle where it's still runny. Awesome. And again, you can add to it. The analogy I'm making is that poached eggs are good for you, but they can be filling.
And then you're adding Spam to that.
because the Spam is, there's some like, it's like, oh well, this is, maybe this is not good for me, but this is flavorful and delicious here, and my experience was there's some of that in there. There's like, oh wow, I really like that part. Yeah, sure, it's an oldie, because Spam has been around a long time, and you wouldn't think, oh, that stuff's terrible. No, it's still good, still freaking good. So that's why I'm making that comparison. So yeah, that's my recommendation for this one. Worst case scenario, you get Spam and eggs, and if you follow your heart, you can't go wrong with that. That's just good stuff. Seriously.
I had a nice after dinner wine, like a sweet wine, port or something. However, I infused it with some extracts.
Mm.
I'm just going to say that Fantasia has got to go down in history as one of the all-time greatest stoner movies, with good reason, because I thoroughly enjoyed the completely abstract animation set to Toccata Fugue in D minor.
Setting the mood. Okay, fair.
I think that like, and I do think this segment sets the mood for the whole thing. I like that it doesn't come out of the gate, completely like literal storytelling. They're like, okay, this is going to be a different kind of a thing, So anyway, that was my take on the first one. Then it goes to probably one of the most recognized pieces of classical music in history. Certainly, at least one of the most recognized pieces of classical music by modern audiences, which is the Nutcracker Suite by Tchaikovsky. And they could have gone the route of being literal with this, right? And having nutcrackers and sugar plum fairies and, although they did have fairies, and they could have had like, toys and Christmas stuff. They didn't do that, which I appreciated. They had like fish and flowers and fairies and mushrooms, which I must note were white and red, the exact coloration of so-called magic mushrooms. Take that for what you will, and flowers and stuff like that.
Yeah.
I remember as a kid when I saw this film being like, oh God, like I don't want to see this stuff, like um however, as an adult, I also liked this segment.
Definitely better. A lot of times they were emulating figures, without actually having figures, right? So they had the dancing, etc. And they did this in other places, but this is very good there. Side note, this is probably the first really noticeable examples, they have of racial stereotypes. Which arguably, if you didn't, or if you weren't looking for, you wouldn't see. But the mushrooms are definitely, Asian stereotypes. It was honestly, it was cute. There was a lot of cool stuff in there. I'm starting to think some of this, and I think Becca mentioned this. She's like, I, that she was like, oh, I could do this myself. I do this myself in my head, which harkens back to what you mentioned before about maybe videos, mess with the song itself. They serve you up what you're supposed to be imagining, in many ways. Maybe they over explain, but this is what I do like about this. This is a take, this is one version. I thought they could have gone hardcore, realistic, and they didn't do, not realistic. What's the word I'm looking for? It's like they could have just done it, frankly, from the stage direction, and they didn't do that. So I appreciate that.
In order to get the dancing stuff like that, they actually filmed. Disney movies did this a lot. They would film live actors, and then the animators would sort of animate based on that.
Oh,
So
wow.
they filmed dancers for a lot of these things, except the mushrooms. The mushrooms were actually based on Three Stooges gags.
Oh,
So
my.
I mentioned that because we had mentioned the Three Stooges earlier in the show here. So yeah, the Three Stooges had they have all sorts of cultural impacts that people don't realize.
Yeah, man. Wow.
That brings us to the centerpiece of this, which is The Sorcerer's Apprentice. So The Sorcerer's Apprentice is the third major piece here. It is based on Getty's 1797 poem Der Zauberling or something like that. I don't know how you say that. It's basically a young apprentice of the sorcerer Yen Sid attempts some of his master's magic, but doesn't know how to control them, right? So this one is what originally kicked this whole thing off. This was supposed to be a feature film, and then it got cut down to this. This was the attempt to revive Mickey Mouse for.
Did it work?
I think that's debatable. They had originally considered using Dopey instead
Really?
from the Seven Dwarfs.
Okay, I can see that.
So this one was done with gouache, which I figured I would have to mention. You would appreciate that this entire segment.
I did my time. You can't take
All
me
I
back.
gotta say is this segment deals heavily with water in the plot and gouache. Now, gouache and water, if you've ever worked with them as an artist, these two things do weird things when they're mixed.
Man, look. Okay, so I'm a art school dropout, and did not love gouache. Let's just put it that way.
Okay, what did you think of this segment?
Hand drawn deliciousness. Mwah. Lots of layers, lots of depth. It was narrative, but it was all. But they did not like contain themselves. So like, okay, this happened next exactly. You know, like you could go down into a whirlpool and come back out. It was all kinds of stuff going on, and you know, interesting that they within this fantasy setting they use a dream sequence would make it even bigger. Well, that was cool. I can see seeing this and thinking like that is awesome. I'm wanting to see more, to be honest. Interesting. I was interested in the interplay between the characters, which was of course without words. So that was cool. And so they had to do with all of the expressions, which in contrast to the huge movements of the entire thing was a nice contrast. They had the big and the small. This stands up. This is still good stuff. And this is the stuff where I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, yes. And I've never seen it more than just, you know, a minute cut here and there because, you know, Disney, especially at one point, recycled a lot of stuff into other things. So, but yeah, I give this a definite thumbs up. Great music and a good story.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's a ton of fun. It's a good story. Yeah, there's not much to tell. This is like a straightforward, fun cartoon the way most people are used to cartoons being. If you were to take this segment out, it stands up alongside of like what's Opera Doc
Yeah.
or the Barber of Seville, the Hair of Seville, you know, or you know, Robin Hood Daffy, or any of those other ones you can like say Duck Dodgers, like any of the like featurette type cartoons, especially set to music. This is right up there with them, you know.
I would agree with that. Yeah. You know, it's one of those things where I'm like, yes, I do understand why you want to preserve this. You know, good fun, and I don't think, you know, I mean, there's no words to it. I feel like it's one of those things is like, yeah, you could show this to people anywhere, and they kind of get it and dig it. So
Yeah. Yeah, as long as you were familiar with the concept of magic and you know, wizards and stuff. Um Even if you weren't, it probably would still work, but I don't know.
I think even if you weren't familiar with that magic, you know, like he's a wizard because he's got a hat. You know, people everywhere are familiar with magic, and you would figure it out real quick. Oh, see, everything's on screen and told. You know, I think it's a self-contained thing, and I think that by itself makes it really great. And then they do a great job of showing it. So it's like, you know, we have a self-contained story. We have we have, you know, all the elements are there on the screen. I don't think there's any fat in it. I do believe it's a universal story. You could put that and show that to anybody, language independent, and they get it, and they probably really enjoy it because it's goofy fun. Okay, it's Mickey fun, not goofy fun. Yeah.
Yep. Okay. So now we're about to get to the reason why we've included this in our thing on dinosaurs. There were a lot of music pieces that were considered for this and then like discarded in favor of something else. And one of the ones they were considering is a piece of classical music that is one of my all-time favorites, Stravinsky's Firebird Suite. Now, they did not end up using the Firebird Suite because I think Leopold Stokowski, the conductor, he suggested the Rite of Spring instead, which was also by Stravinsky. Allegedly, Disney himself, Walt Disney, when he heard the Rite of Spring, said, quote, "This is marvelous. It would be perfect for prehistoric animals. There would be something terrific in dinosaurs, flying lizards, and prehistoric monsters. There could be beauty in the settings."
Hey.
Unquote. So whenever people wonder why Disney's name is on this entire like studio, it's because of stuff like that.
Yeah.
Maybe he wasn't the guy that, or one of the hundreds of animators that like worked on it. I don't know. Worked on this Rite of Spring animals, prehistoric animals thing.
Yeah.
But it was his idea,
Yeah. His
and
vision.
they originally wanted the story to go as far as mammals and humans discovering fire and all that.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
That's
but supposedly Disney wanted to avoid controversy from creationists who were already got wind of it, I guess, and were
Oh
gonna
yeah, I was
cause
surprised because they
trouble.
presented it as like, this is science tells us what the real origin of life is, and it's like, what? You guys just said that out loud on here? That seems a little controversial, but that's what they did. you
Yeah.
know. So I mean, I always thought that was already controversial there. So I'd already thought that, and I'm like, okay, so yeah, I guess maybe not like I was like, oh, and then the rest of evolution, they could just stop there and be like, okay, yeah, we fade the black on that. But like they did, they started not with the dinosaurs, but like with primeval ooze and basic boiling early atmosphere.
So if you remember Journey Back in Time, when we watched that, like it's the opposite of that, where they were going all the way back to the primal ooze. This starts with the primal ooze and works its way forward.
Now, what year was that again? Because I forget already.
I think that was 55 in
Yep.
Czechoslovakia. And then in the I think it was like 65 when it was released in the US.
Interesting. So yeah, I mean, they were probably
Or
influenced.
67 or something like that. Yeah.
So I this may have been the first time I'm like, yeah, we're gonna animate this. We're gonna animate evolution. Wow. I mean,
Yeah, and they also had a Roy Chapman Andrews, who was the director of the American Museum of Natural History, Julian Huxley, a biologist, the astronomer Edwin Hubble, who, the Hubble Space Telescope is named after, and Barnum Brown, a paleontologist, as consultants on this. So they actually went to actual scientists. So while some of the things like, the forms and postures of the dinosaurs and stuff like that we now think are different, this was, they were going to real scientists at the time for their information here.
notably, they say that they were not presenting the what we grew up with as this is how dinosaurs died, the dinosaur killing asteroid, which I know it's science, not settled, but that wasn't even presented. That's not how they showed that bit. So that's
Well,
interesting.
that theory came about in our childhood, right? It didn't, but before that, they thought maybe an ice age killed them. There were other things, but that's a more recent development. That dates to our lifetime, I'm pretty sure, at least it hitting the popular consciousness.
Well, then, so what you're saying is it's like almost, then it's like half a century old, Eric. Oh, ouch, ouch, that hurt. Oh.
Half a century. You're talking about this movie?
No, I'm talking about this theory. The theory.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, because it dates from our childhood.
Okay.
I gave myself an old man moment.
I
know.
Okay, listeners, there's
I'm
just gonna be
dragging
a
you
lot
down
of
with
that.
me. You're not old man, but I am. I'm just you're going down.
You're ruining my cred with Gen Z. This is like
oh wait, we were talking about this. Let's get to the dinosaurs, y'all.
yeah, because that's the whole reason we put this on our slate to do. What did you think about the dinosaurs?
Okay, so they did a bunch of different stuff up to that. This cool smoke fade in between, eras, and then they got to, I'm gonna say probably the wrong thing, the pterodons or the pterodactyls. They were pterodactyls from last kid. But anyway, and it was a immediate difference. The art style was different. It was sharp, and it was different. It became the thing, and man, I think it really holds up. It was exciting animation that I think holds up to this day. That you could see all that happening. There, like you said, there's some things where I'm like, man, that T-Rex, their arms are really big, which I mean, I don't know, but it didn't matter. It was these were dinosaurs, great interactions, fights, struggles, truly good stuff. And if there was any criticism, I'd say two on the beat in some places for their movements, but it was still amazing, lovely, loved it.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
agree. This has always been a highlight of this for me. As a kid, I think my parents and other people expected me to like the Mickey Mouse part best. I definitely really liked the dinosaur part too. We also get a classic dinosaur battle. It's not T-Rex
Yes.
versus Triceratops, and this is T-Rex versus Stegosaurus. But
Yeah.
I feel like you always get an Allosaurus or T-Rex, and it's always like versus like usually either a Stego or a Triceratops. Those are the sort of classic matchups, you know?
Yeah. Okay. So here's that. This is a weird thing, but is because I don't have the film history, but I'm like, well, what would they have shown before that? Were there any, were there any, like, I don't know, safaris where movies where they had, like, lions on not elephants, I don't know, rhinoceros or something? Was there a precursor before they started showing that particular dinosaur pairing, where they showed another predator prey pairing, where both of them were ferocious and it was a battle to the death? Yeah, I
I
don't
don't
know.
know, but remember, we already watched The Lost World from 1925, so pretty
Yeah,
much the
right.
very beginning, and that had a T-Rex versus uh was that also a Stego? I'm trying to remember.
There's Well, it was more than one. Does he remember?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, we had we.
It was a Styracosaurus versus an Allosaurus.
Hmm.
Um,
Man, I almost don't want to ask this because dinosaurs are kind of like Pluto. They've shifted under my feet. Is Ankylosaur still a thing?
as far as I know, Ankylosaur is a thing.
Oh, thank goodness! I love me some
But I
Ankylosaur.
think the reason you don't see a lot of Ankylosaur battles is because Ankylosaur is like a tank, but without a main gun. Like I think maybe the tail is like a club with the
Yeah,
Ankylosaur, so that could be cool. But I think like traditionally people are like, oh, Stegosaurus, they have spikes on their tail,
yeah,
or like Triceratops, they have spikes on their head. Now, the Ankylosaur, I think, had spikes along its sides, right?
it did,
So,
man. I
you
I don't
know,
know. I think they're underrated. You
yeah.
know,
I
but
was thinking about Ankylosaur too, and I was thinking, it'd be cool to see an Ankylosaur in a battle scene.
I'll put that in my movie.
Those of you making the next round of Jurassic Park films, we want to see an Ankylosaur battle.
All right, so one thing I want to mention about that, because this is in terms of things that changed. All of the dinosaurs were notably dull colored, and I remember that when I was growing up. They like, no, dinosaurs were, they're kind of muted colors and stuff. There was no bright colors or anything, and we still thought they were awesome. Now we have every indication it's like, oh no, they probably had all kinds of crazy ass colors and feathers. By the way, we didn't realize that. So the other thing that I really thought was notable, of course, is that they ended it in a drought,
Yep.
an earthquake, and then a flood. Hmm.
Yeah.
Good. Yeah. So
I think that how dinosaurs died out was not yet known, and this predates the meteorite comet theory. So I think they thought it could have been any one of these things, so we'll just show all of the things. It was a drought and a flood, and Well, there goes your dinosaur stuff. But we're going to continue on and talk about some of the other things in this. The next segment is the Pastoral Symphony by Beethoven. And this one goes to myth. So it's basically there's Romanesque or Greek centaurs and centaurettes.
No, why was that necessary?
Well, I think because originally in Greek mythology, centaurs are always male, right?
Yeah, probably.
So there was also fawns and little cupids and stuff like that. It's basically a festival of Bacchus, a bacchanal, god of wine.
Oh yeah.
Zeus basically interrupts it. He has Vulcan like create lightning bolts for him to throw at the attendees because I guess he doesn't like partying too late or something. I don't know.
He just seemed like he was having a good. Oh, this is fun. Ha ha ha. But Zeus kind of a jerk anyway. So I mean, I thought they kind of did my man, Vulcan dirty because that dude's based, and they made him seem like he was right. Yeah, let's do that. That seemed fun. Like no, but this was interesting because, and harkening back actually to earlier, we talked about this when me and Becca talked a little bit about this with the fairies earlier and stuff. And like, there's like this weird nudity, right? It's they're not clothed. They they don't have a lot of details, but they definitely have breasts, but no nipples. And weirdly, we see the centaurettes in this section. They start out without any clothes, and then they actually put on tops. So it's very weird space to me. I'm like, what are you? I'm not really sure what you're trying to do here.
Well, I'll tell you what happened with this one.
Oh, there's history.
The animators actually originally did it where they were like bare-breasted and all of that. And then the infamous Hayes office of censorship of films, it was like, no, you can't do that. But then they had to like erase the nipples and like discreetly hang garlands of flowers and like put tops on and stuff like that to like get it past the censors.
This may be one of those things where I'm like, okay, maybe fair enough. I mean, just planning on probably some kids seeing this. I don't know, man. It also
well, all kids see bare breasts, though. This is something that I've never understood about the U.S. It's like, what is the first thing you see when you come into the world? When you open your eyes, like breasts right in your face,
It's different, man.
Basically, it was censored, and we'll revisit this topic later on. But basically, it was censored, and that's why this happened.
Okay, but, and they were only there for a hot second. But man, the zebra centaurettes that entered with Bacchus,
yeah,
who were like black stereotypes and zebras, and I'm like, wow, that is a whole thing. And
well, they cut the black centaurs out.
No, they had the centaurettes there. Now I think there's probably more that they probably cut
there
out.
were some that they cut out because they thought, and I've never seen it, so I don't know, but they thought that they thought at the time that it would come across as racist.
Wow. But they left in, wasn't it?
This is probably my least favorite segment. I love mythology, and to me, like, there's one Eros or Cupid and not lots of little chubby cherubs.
Chubby and sexless, by the way.
That's like Christian to me. That's like we're gonna make them angels and stuff like that.
It was weird.
So we just came off of this dinosaur thing where they were incredibly period accurate and as to what was known. And it goes into, I get it's fantasy and mythology is not real, but I would have liked to have seen it more accurately resemble Greek mythology.
It felt weirdly like, I don't know, the artist barely concealed like personal kink. I'm like, it was like, so this is all about like people hooking up and
like if you're gonna go there, go all the way. And they couldn't because of the Hayes office. So I'll give them that, but they probably should have subbed it out for a different thing. Like when as soon as they were told you gotta like erase the nipples, that's like the time they would have been like, okay, let's just not do this,
Yeah, I mean, why not violence? Were you guys not American? You know what though? That actually, given the time period, maybe they're like, yeah, we don't want more violence.
That's a discussion for another time. Let's go on to the next segment. I should say we skipped over something here. There was an intermission in between Rite of Spring and Pastoral Symphony.
Oh yeah. And they had jazz, baby.
The musicians left the stage. We see the Fantasia title card. And then there's a jam session.
Yeah.
Led by a clarinetist and there was a demonstration of how sound is rendered on film. They used a line to demonstrate how,
Oh yeah, the soundtrack.
yep, how the soundtrack works.
Okay, I just realized or remembered something. All right, when we were kids, how many film strips did we watch? Right?
Oh yeah.
And how many of them, God, probably so many of them were made by Disney anyway. So much of this just resembles so many, especially the intervals in between. It's like, oh, it's an educational film strip, which might account it for like some of the sleepiness too, because that always put me to sleep. So yeah, it's weird. So the context, I'm coming from a place where like this happened, but I had years later in the 70s, I was still consuming, educational film strips that were probably made back then. So, this is what it triggered in my head. And that's what definitely the film, the soundtrack bit. I'm like, well, this seems very educational and not entertaining. So,
Yeah.
but the jazz, man, it was so cool. They were just jamming. It felt very, no, it didn't. It did not. It felt very stiff but they were trying to be cool. I get it. That's fair.
Yeah. I mean, I'm okay with it given that this is the time that people are probably standing up and walking around and going to get popcorn and stuff like that. So, you know, it is okay for what it was. So the next segment is Dance of the Hours by Ponchielli. This is a piece of music I was not familiar with.
Yeah.
This is my biggest problem with Fantasia. It is getting better and better all along, and then it takes a dip. First with the Pastoral Symphony, and then with Dance of the Hours, which is hippo and her servants and like elephants and stuff, alligators and stuff like that,
Oh
dancing
yeah.
around. This just it wasn't to my taste, musically or visually. It's just not my thing. So I get that it was well done. I can't give it a full thumbs down because it's still good animation, all that, but this is definitely a thumbs sideways for me.
Okay, fair. I do think it was probably the lowest dip. The beginning was really lame. I thought, oh my god, so many dancing ostriches and so many dances. But it came back for me a lot in terms of enjoyment with the introduction of the crocodiles. So the crocodile coming out, being goofy little short art limb dudes, the aggressors in the dance, and they're the men and the whatever, and they just okay. So that part was a lot of fun to me. I love the crocodiles, but I could have lost most of that. It was and it had a little bit of the Pepe Le Pew, but because come to me, I am your, but it wasn't enough. It was not enough to make it worthwhile. But I'll try to steal from it because I'm a weirdo like that. So yeah, this is a low point, definitely.
That brings us to the finale.
Ooh.
This was my favorite part as a kid, even more than the dinosaurs. This is still my favorite part as an adult. This is just awesome. Mussorgsky's Night on Bald Mountain, which is a piece of music I love, and Ave Maria. It's followed up by Ave Maria. It's pretty much based on Mussorgsky's own notes about what he envisioned when he was composing this. You have like a demon atop a mountain unfolding its wings. You have all these ghosts and
spirits rising up from their graves.
Yeah, the spirits basically they dance and fly through the air until they're finally driven back by a Angela spell, and night fades into dawn, and there's a chorus hearing Ave Maria and lined robe monks walking with lighted torches through a forest into the ruins of a cathedral. Okay, this is just for me amazing. What did you think?
Wow. Yeah, it It slaps. I got goosebumps talking about it. It was so cool. The dancing spirits, the transformations, the devil himself reigning over it all. The way he was part of the mountain and unfurled and became, and then he went back at the end. Yeah, I really loved it, and it's funny. It's like I'm like, wow, that even down to like I kept seeing them like I don't have tattoos, but I could see having that tattoo. That looks like that would be a good tattoo. For some of the spirits and the dancing and stuff, I'm like, oh, I kind of want that. I'm like, maybe just on a t-shirt. So yeah, very good. I kind of wonder if they, is it was entirely artistic choice to bring in the Ave Maria, or was it also like, well, we're going to show a lot of demons here. We're going to have to make that go away. That cannot be how we end. But it didn't bother me. I thought it was a great ending. Also, maybe I'm just a very good observant person, or maybe I'm a perv, but they did have a harpy and she did have nipples, which I'm assuming was okay because she was a devil.
I guess so.
Oh man, but no, it was great. There were great illustrations. I felt like a lot of stuff that they were referencing was probably from some classical, historical artwork. The depictions of spirits. Like I could see some of them, like, oh yeah, I can see that having been on, one of the variations of the pirate flag, for example. Since there's more than just the Jolly Rogers, there's all kinds of demons and stuff, or on some pirate flags. But anyway, yeah, I felt like it was probably researched and really delivered. Still love it. I more of that.
Yeah. It's worth noting that Bela Lugosi was brought in to do the posing for the so he was the reference model
Wow.
for Chernabog, who's the demon.
Oh my gosh. You know what? I know we're geeking out about stuff, but I mean that was a geek move. All this stuff that we're like, yeah, we should bring in consultants on how to do this. It's like,
Oh, they had so many ideas that like this is why Disney was known as like the Dream Factory or whatever, because like originally they wanted to put incense in the theaters and like light it during the end part of this, they would throw out all these ideas and then most of them got rejected, but the stuff that made it, just because they could totally do whatever they wanted.
okay, yeah.
I've been in a lot of times where I've been in jobs and they're like, they want you to be creative, but then they don't let you do anything, or they just plain from the get-go put too many restrictions on stuff. I'm like,
Right.
let's just try this. Like, if it doesn't work, it doesn't work, but let's try it because it could be cool,
Swinging and miss is better than never swinging at all, but that's not how business works. Right.
Yeah, if you're familiar with any of the behind the scenes on Disney stuff, that's always been the case,
Yeah.
And that's kind of what brought Pixar to the fore too, because they had the same attitude. It's like just turn them loose and let them do their thing, and then we can always pull it back and say no later.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you like animation at all, watch it. It's worth it. You will get something from it. Yeah, watch it. It's good. Even the parts where I'm like, oh, I'm like, yeah, you know what? It's okay. It's worth watching that to get to the rest of it. And if you're an animation fan, you will have more. It'll have been worthwhile. Yeah, definitely.
I love this film. It's in my top 100 for sure. Does it make the top 10 list? I don't know, but it is an essential viewing for me. And I've
Yeah.
watched it multiple times over my lifetime. I'm sure I will watch it many more. This is as good as it gets. This is a 10 out of 10 for me.
All right. Excellent. Well said.
Okay. Until next time, whenever that is, I don't know when that's going to be. Please like and subscribe. Help us through this time of slow output by going back and listening to some of the older episodes. We try to make it so that you can listen to these things at any time. That's one of the reasons we don't do the latest film that's coming out right now. There are tons of other places where you can get that from. We
Yeah.
deliberately want to go back and look at stuff maybe you didn't see, but with the ability to stream tons and tons and tons and tons of stuff, you have the video store in your home now, so it's a lot easier to see this stuff, and there's a lot of good stuff out there that is, you know, probably better than most of what's getting released on a daily basis today. So
Mhm.
if you want to talk to us about it, you can write us at GC8 Podcast. That's letter G, letter C, number 8 podcast at gmail.com. Tell 2 people about the show. That's probably the biggest way you can help us. Just tell 2 other people about the show. Of course, like and subscribe and do all that on whatever platform you come to this from. Until next time, this is Eric
And this is Will.
signing off.
Peace.
iPods are old tech.
Yes, iPods are old tech. I mean, yeah, I mean, it is what it is, man. I mean,